Thank you. I'd like to welcome you all tonight to this forum for the new elementary school building that we're proposing tonight. We have a presentation. It will run pretty close to an hour. There'll be at the end, there'll be a portion of reserved for questions, any comments, and that sort of thing. There's also a presentation that will be playing as we're presenting, if you can follow along. And for those of you at home, in a second, we'll go over some rules where you can participate in that. But over the course of the next hour, we're going to go through a few things. We're going to talk about how we get to this point, the district need, and why we're building a new school, and what made the school that we're building become our preferred option before the MSBA and the one that we'll be presenting to the town. We'll also discuss how we took that proposal, tried to incorporate sort of a global view of the school system generally. That's beyond my expertise, of course. We'll hear from the architects, DRA, from Vertex, the owner's project manager, who will tell us they'll describe the building that they designed for us specifically in more detail than I ever could. And Vertex will go through some of the numbers, which I know has been a topic of discussion townwide, online, and otherwise, that everybody, of course, has an interest in. And for my part, I get to introduce people from speaker to speaker. Before I get into that, I want to get right into the program, but if Jeff Pickett, if you could just give us some of the ground rules and how we're going to manage questions, and for those not in the room participating online, how you can submit questions.
Feel like this is a debate. Good evening, I'm Jeffrey Pickett. I'm the Media Relations Manager for the Stoughton Public Schools, and if you are watching remotely this evening, we have a Zoom feed going, and you could utilize the Q&A feature on Zoom, and we will be going through our questions towards the end of the presentation. So feel free to enter questions as you go along and listen to the presentation. If you're watching live on Stoughton Media Access, you can go on the Stoughton Public Schools website, register for the Zoom, and be able to ask us questions as you watch along on SMAC. SMAC is broadcasting live on Comcast 8 and Verizon 24 and on StoughtonTV.com as well. And I'll turn it back over to Mr. Recupero.
Mr. Recupero sounds so official, though. But so this actually started quite a while ago. This project was in its infancy, started maybe 2 or 3 years ago when the committee was formed. We started talking about designs and how we were going to scope this out. But the concept of what we were going to do to address a need with the South School goes back all the way to 2010. The way this works, the MSBA process and every town building generally is assessed by a facilities master plan committee. Actually, DRA was intimately involved in that and put together facilities master plan. We looked through all of the schools and prioritized needs. Again, going back to 2010, that was updated when I was on the Board of Selectmen. That was in 2014 or so. There was a meeting, and we were discussing needs for the buildings, specifically the high school and the South School. MSBA at that, that's the Mass School Building Authority, who will fund a grant for this. They came out, and we met with MSBA. They looked at both the South School. They looked at the high school also. The high school at that time was the project that they chose to invite us into. But the South School at that time, and this goes back now 10 years, that was 2014, it was identified as a priority for this town. So even though we started the high school project, because that allowed for the biggest bang for the community, it was a need 10 years ago, and it's only degrading since. So the facilities master plan that gets updated and has very recently too, I think 2022 was the, strike that, Dr. Baeta points this out to me every time. 2021 was the last time we did it. The school's not getting any newer. Things are degrading. Need needs to be addressed, and that's the whole process through the MSBA. We identified a need. The town forms a school feasibility a school building committee. We do a feasibility study. The committee's job is to take about a year to address how we fix and fill and satisfy that need for the town, for the educational needs of the town specifically. So that's where we are right now. And I don't want to spend any more time talking about the past. I'd really like for you to hear this project because it took me a while, because you discuss the nuts and bolts of things and they're kind of dry. But once you get to see some of the things that we're proposing for you, I hope you're as excited about them as I am. And if I can toss off to Dr. Baeta to get into that.
Good evening, all. Joe Baeta. I'm also a resident here. I am this new superintendent as of this past July 1st. It's great to be with you all and literally putting forward to you a 21st century school for hopefully opening by the fall of 27. The bullets that are in front of you are really key to the overarching perspective of what you try to do with the MSBA. Much of this is actually things that we have to do. Having a facilities master plan, Stoughton is actually one of those communities through years upon years has had a facilities master plan. Not every district does. And what does it really look like? What are our buildings looking like? What are the needs of our buildings? The educational plan, the support elementary education plan, one of our colleagues will be speaking specifically about that later, but that is part of the process of really taking a look and saying, how is this school going to literally benefit the education of students in the 21st century, and what does that mean to the district? So you're looking at every composite of education that takes place, including special services, special education services, EL services, and in this particular site, the facilities, looking at a gym that's actually larger and so on and so forth, and we'll get into that throughout the night. This new building also allows for us to take a look at something that is very significant to us right now, and that is increased enrollment district-wide and the needs of students. So within this building, you'll see it's color coordinated. Once you get to see the specifics, it's actually notes the areas that are for special education, EL support, OT, PT, speech, and so on and so forth within this building. Entering the 21st century in 2024, so 24 years into this, STEM lab, literally looking at a lab area where you have the science, the technology, the engineering, and the mathematics coming together as a hands-on application process for students. Next, the maintenance and operating costs of a district. I was just telling Mr. Buckley before this started, the difference between the Jones School and the high school is hundreds of thousands of dollars more to heat the Jones than to heat the new high school. If that doesn't tell you something about efficiencies, in today's world. So here we're looking at maintenance and operating costs that could be very, very beneficial to the district long term, as well as so that this project also has some embedded supports coming in from grants in the area of utilities that we will be talking about with you. Travel between schools. In this particular situation, the elementary school begins the process of consolidation if it goes through. So there's a lot of benefits with staff. Less staff to be shared amongst multiple buildings is one of them, potentially because of the size of this building, which is around that 515 plus. We'll be able to support that. Which leads to shared resources. Another benefit that we could have from this is that we can actually be more efficient in our shared resources and allow for students to get more of those resources than we currently have in K through 5. And then lastly, the reduced cost of multiple resources. Again, I just brought up earlier the idea of utilities having a savings, but here we're also looking at, because you have a bigger school, any product, software, technology, textbooks, everything else becomes more of a larger elementary school. Therefore, you also have the benefit of seeing some reduced costs in purchasing and utilization of the school. Next slide, please. So how we got here is interesting for those of us like myself and many of you in the audience that have been brought up in Stoughton. I remember all of these schools. There's one school up there, the Jones, that I attended, and I attended the Gibbons as well. And as you can see on the outset, the Gibbons and the Dar, 1969, 1971, and then everything before that, mid-60s at the Hanson, and then everything before that is really going back into the 1950s. So you're looking at buildings that have had additions and changes. So the South Elementary School really became, if you recall, a lot of discussion around, is it the South or is it the high school that goes first? We all know it ended up being the high school first, but the South is literally embedded as our next. The Wilkins has some great bones. It also has some new windows, roofing, and so on and so forth. So we've already put money into that building, so we're going to repurpose that building. Same thing with the Hanson, the Taunton, and the Gibbons. Just thinking of it this way, by going to a consolidated, we'll have 4 elementary schools, but the future is also, and this will be up to the future superintendent, the future school committee, but literally, the Daw and the Gibbons are in excellent shape for addition renovations and not having to go to the taxpayers for yet another brand new elementary school, because the bones in those buildings are such in great shape because of all the effort throughout the years that have been placed on those buildings as well. Next slide, and I'm going to turn it over, I believe, to my colleague, Principal Dorr, who is online.
Jake, you're muted right now on our end. Hold on.
I can hear you, Jake.
You can hear me?
I can, but it sounded like they couldn't when they were over in the live zone.
We can now.
Okay.
You can now, Jeff?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Jake Dorr. I'm the principal of the South Elementary School. Happy to be joining you virtually this evening. Just to talk a little bit about the South Elementary School. Before I mention its deficiencies, it is a wonderful place to learn. It's a wonderful place to work. It's a vibrant part of the community. We a wonderful history of success. It's great working there. The problem is when you look at the school itself, it literally looks like it's falling apart in many places. The building envelope or the outside of the building is not energy efficient. There's new leaks every time it rains in our building. You can just kind of see the building itself looks like it is falling apart. The cafetorium, while it does seem big initially, it cannot hold our full amount of students that are currently enrolled in the building and staff during one time. It's very hard to hold more than one grade level for an event in the building, which makes concerts and things like that a real challenge. There's insufficient parking. There's not even enough for the current staff, let alone when guests come to the building. The administrative and nursing areas are very, very, very small. It creates student rights and privacy issues, with everyone basically being in one location at all times. It's not currently meeting special education needs. It wasn't built for offices. It wasn't built for small groups. It was built to accommodate 18 classrooms, and that's, what it does. So it's not really meeting those 21st century educational needs, those special education needs. There's no kindergarten areas that are designated, no kindergarten bathrooms within the classrooms. Building safety continues to be, while the building is safe and we have safe plans, it is not the most optimal building being equipped for safety. You walk into the building and you are inside of the building. There's not, multiple vestibules. There's not different entryways. There's one way in and one way out. The building systems are well beyond their life expectancy. So I know Dr. Baeta spoke a little earlier about just all of the systems are well past what their expected life are, and they cost a lot of money to operate for a small footprint in the Stoughton Public Schools.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Catherine Weiss. I'm the chair of the school committee. The decision to consolidate and move from 5 to 4 elementary schools has been the result of several years of discussion and study. As we've mentioned, the district's facility master plan that was developed in 2018, updated in 2021, and revoted in 2023. The building committee held multiple forums with stakeholders that included educators, families, and residents in the first half of 2023. Following these meetings, the school committee voted in July of 2023 to consolidate from 5 to 4 elementary schools, confirming that the South and the Wilkins would be the buildings that would be studied for repurposing. Next slide, please. The district is at the point of needing to redistrict to reduce pockets of overcrowding, whether this new building succeeds or not. A new consolidated building would allow for more flexibility and accommodate future population bubbles more easily. Note that we are not planning to just merge the South and the Wilkins schools. We've had people ask, are we just busing the Wilkins students over to the new elementary school? That's not what would happen. We would redraw the district lines with consideration of the town's demographics. You can see here the pockets of population, as well as looking at the needs and the resources. We would study that further and seek stakeholders' input in the year leading up to the new school's opening. And as a parent of an elementary school student who is going to be affected by this building, I understand that a lot of people are already asking, where's my student going to go? We don't know that yet, but we will know that in the leading up to the opening of this building. Then he still needs to be studied. Dedicated classrooms in this new school will free up space, and the space freed up at other buildings will allow the district to better serve the needs of a growing special education population. Providing more and better special education programming and services will improve students' education and social and emotional well-being, and it will reduce the number of students sent out of districts, which has financial benefits as well. In combination with the ongoing improvements to the existing school buildings, next slide, please. The new building and the subsequent redistricting would enable the Stoughton Public Schools to address inequalities and amenities across the entire district. The new building plus the three buildings shown here, the Daw, the Gibbons, and the Hanson, would mean more equitable and more accessible facilities for all of Stoughton's elementary school students. These buildings also better fit Stoughton's vision for elementary school education programming, and I will hand it off now to one of the principals to explain more.
Hi, I'm Katie Monahan. I'm the principal of the Wilkins Elementary School. And as Dr. Baeta mentioned earlier, one of the things that we had to do early on in this process was to draft what we call an educational plan. So my colleague, Mr. Dorr, and I wrote the educational plan, which is quite a lengthy document. And prior to writing that, we had several visioning committees where many stakeholders were included and involved in trying to come up with what was important for this town in terms of elementary education going forward. So the themes that you see here on the slide are the ones that kept emerging over and over again. The first one, upper and lower school with distinct grade level neighborhoods, is something that's extremely important when you're looking at elementary schools, especially when you're talking about consolidating and potentially creating a much larger school than the ones we're used to. So the idea is that all of the classes within a grade level band would stay together, and that the grades within developmental levels would also remain together and close. The second idea that kept coming up was the importance of maintaining the outdoor areas so that they would become part of the educational experience for the students. The South School is currently often referred to very fondly as a school in the woods, and we would like to maintain that reputation in the new school that's being built just not that far away from where the school is currently. So the idea would be that the outdoor spaces could be used for extended educational opportunities for the students within the school. The third idea was the focus on community areas, not only for students, but also for teachers. Our schools currently often lack those collaboration spaces that are really important and necessary for the way students learn now. And also teachers need those spaces to be able to collaborate with each other and work with students so that confidentiality can be maintained. We also wanted to make sure that the community areas that would be used outside of school areas, such as the gym and cafeteria, could be used. So this would truly be a community building. Those areas could be locked. The rest of the building could be locked, so those areas could be used, and the rest of the school could not be disturbed, which is one of the key components of making sure that this building and the area around the building was truly be used for the community. And finally, there is a large focus on that idea of centralized learning commons and the STEM spaces. So the new building, the library, which we mostly know it as, which we call now Learning Commons, is literally the heart of the school. You walk in and you're greeted by this wonderful area of learning, with right above it, there is a STEM lab where students can work on science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Students K through 5 will have access to that space. And again, these are all the themes that were really important so that we can move forward with elementary education in town.
Good evening. I'm Carl Franceschi, a principal with DRA Architects, and we have the pleasure of sort of carrying out that educational plan that you just heard about and trying to transform it into a physical school. And we'll share some of those images with you tonight. I apologize if you've seen some of these before, but there are some folks, no doubt, listening or in the audience who maybe are seeing this for the first time. So we'd like to take you through the current status of the design. And it started with a feasibility study, as was mentioned, that looked at several different options, including an addition and renovation to the existing South School. But in the end, after studying several different configurations of new construction on an adjacent parcel of land that the town owns, it was decided to go with the option that we refer to as the pinwheel option, where the school, the second one there, has distinct wings of classroom neighborhoods, as we call them, and it's located on a piece of land referred to as the Line Lumber Site that has frontage on Park Street, just a bit north of the existing South Elementary School. The map there on the left shows approximately the relationship between the existing South School and this parcel of land to the north. The town has owned this parcel since the early 60s. It was purchased for school purposes, and it does have frontage on Park Street. There will be a new entrance there. We're still working with the state on exactly what that intersection will look like and how it's signalized and so forth, but there'll be a dedicated driveway into the new school. And just looking at the way the building fits the site, you can see some of those characteristics of the education plan, how they're accommodated here, particularly at this level, how the outdoor spaces are incorporated into the building. By having those wings, it allows those play areas and outdoor classrooms, outdoor paved play areas in very close proximity to the building itself to make it very convenient for students to come and go and to be well supervised and safe. The site is generous 60 acres or so, which actually allows a fair amount of it to be left natural. And we, again, hope that gets integrated into the curriculum, too. There can be nature trails, and there are wetlands on the site to be integrated into the science programs and so forth. And we tried to minimize and keep the school itself as compact as possible, so there are future opportunities on the parcel as well. There will be two ways in and out of the site. In addition to Park Street, there will be a secondary emergency access, which is always prudent to have, that connects to the abutting street there. The site plan, we can zoom in on a bit too, allows for separate bus loop and separate parent drop-off. In fact, two sort of parent drop-offs to accommodate the traffic, which if you are a South School family right now, you know it's a very challenging time of day to access the site. This site hopefully will be much more accommodating. That does have a drop-off loop at the front door. It has a kindergarten drop-off that circulates around the building with a lot of queuing area for cars to pull off of Park Street, and a separate dedicated bus loop. Because there will be a few more buses serving the school as it grows to be 500 students. And here you can see those play areas around the building. It allows to have age-appropriate play areas. So there's a kindergarten play area separated from the older children, and there's a paved play area directly off the cafeteria, which makes it convenient at recess time. Go to the next. And acknowledging the community aspect of this school, too, the building committee has opted to include, in addition to what you might see at an elementary school, an outdoor paved play area, here there'll be an outdoor basketball court and two outdoor pickleball courts open to the community, and then a under 12 age soccer field as well. So it's an improvement over what the South School currently offers as well in this part of town. And moving on to just share with you some of the inspirational images, photographs of other projects of how the landscaping might be developed here. We're still in the design stage, but we're incorporating some features like this into the planning of the school. It's a great site, wonderful opportunity to work with nature there. There is a little bit of topography, so there will be some opportunities for having some of these amphitheater-like spaces built into hillsides and so forth. Again, trying to work that theme of a school in the woods. The other aspect of this project that we should mention publicly is it's going to be a very environmentally friendly and energy efficient building. There are fairly high bar of sustainability goals that are set for this, which will help not only in accruing some of those rebates from utility companies and higher reimbursement from the state school building authority for the initial construction, but also, of course, being energy efficient, it will help reduce operating costs as well. We are considering a fair portion of the building to be fed by ground source geothermal wells feeding into ground source heat pumps. The building will be all electric, no fossil fuels, again, to be environmentally friendly these days. It will meet this environmental standard called LEED, for those who are familiar with it, at the silver level as a minimum. It may actually be higher than that by the time we're finished. And obviously has several other air quality and material benefits for the occupants of the building as well. Also, we're looking at an extensive amount of roof area that can be solar ready. We're still working as to what the best ownership opportunities are for those panels, whether the town owns them or works out a power purchase agreement for those. But there are a fair amount of roof area that you can see there highlighted in yellow that can generate, obviously, electricity right on site. And here's the soccer field is highlighted here because that's the location of where those geothermal wells will be driven into the ground. They go down very deep, like 1,000 feet deep, and using the temperature differential of the earth, you pump water down, you bring it back up, and exchange the heat from that. So you do pay for the electricity for the pumps, but otherwise you're not using gas, you're not using electric to heat and cool the building. And the areas of the footprint of the building that are highlighted in yellow are those areas that will be fed by the geothermal system. They're basically the areas that are higher use year-round areas, like the office area, the cafeteria, the gym, and one wing of classrooms that might be used for summer school, where the air conditioning load is a bit higher, and therefore it actually makes the payback more attractive for the geothermal system. And then just moving on to the building itself, looking at this is a rendering of the front entrance of the building, proposed entrance. The larger circle on the right is the main entrance into the school, immediately adjacent to the administration area where students would enter on a daily basis. But to the left is the so-called community or events entrance. It goes directly into the cafeteria and gym, and the rest of the school can be closed off. So if there's an evening event or a weekend event, the rest of the school can be safely closed off, and the community can come and go. There are men's and women's rooms there that can serve that portion of the building. And as we say, it's really thought of as a community building, not just for the South neighborhood. And we started looking at exterior materials. Early on, you'll see a rendering of the building, but we are trying to think of it in a very sort of naturalistic way because it is a wooded site now. We want it to sort of fit in there, so we're using some traditional masonry, some stone down near the ground because there are some stone outcroppings in the site right now. And then we're using a wood-like material too. It's not literally wood, which is a high maintenance material, but it's a sort of a substitute for that fiber cement material, a very durable, long-lasting material for the upper portions, the upper stories of the building as well. And the windows will be tinted and in some cases triple glazed to be highly energy efficient as well. And we're developing some of these materials now in conjunction with the building committee as we move forward. And here's sort of the programming of the building that is strongly reflective of the educational plan. So it is kind of a pinwheel where there are 4 wings coming out of a central hub. 2 of those wings are classroom wings, and each classroom wing is a grade. So there's a kindergarten wing, a first grade, second, and so forth. And they're organized in an upper and lower elementary school, much like you heard the principal mention for the educational plan. And at the hub of the school is that Learning Commons. It's sort of the modern evolution of the library in elementary schools. And then one other wing of the building, the yellow, is the community wing with the cafeteria and gymnasium. And the fourth wing is the administration wing, right by the main entrance there. Here's the sort of floor plans. Architecturally, those blue areas are the classroom areas. You can see that they're not quite parallel, the two sides of the corridors down those wings. That's intentionally to open up the area to allow what we'd call extended learning areas. So not all learning happens in classrooms these days. Some of it happens in smaller breakout rooms or collaboration areas just outside the classrooms. So that's the yellow areas there are not just corridors, but they are useful and functional areas as well. And if you can see the plans closely too, you notice the school is not just a collection of all similar sized classrooms. There are a variety of sizes there, some very small rooms for so-called pull-out sessions, one-on-one or one-on-two, or some half-size classrooms that are small group rooms that might have 6 or 8 students in it with an instructor, and so forth. So there's a good variety of spaces in the building. And again, organized in kind of direct reflection of the education plan. And then we have some illustrations too, is to show some of the spaces in the building. And they were inspired by some of the other schools that we visited or that we shared with the committee too, or that they shared with us, I should say, as designers. These are some inspirational photographs of some of the kinds of spaces that we'd like to see in the new school. And you'll see those reflected as we share with you some of the images. So these are other schools. Here, we'll share with you some images of the proposed school in a moment here. So here, as was mentioned, as you walk in the front door of the school, this is the hub of the school, the heart of the school, the so-called Learning Commons. It is a library in the traditional sense of having books, but it's much more than that too. It supports other activities and meetings and small groups, but it's also kind of the circulation hub of the building. But with those bookcases and partitions, there is still some privacy. There are some separate areas too directly off of it. So that it works both as sort of a collective space, but also an open space too that's visible from every level of the building. All 3 floors of the building can look into this space. And to the left there is the main stair of the building, which is obviously a functional stair, but it's also a place you can sit like an amphitheater, and there can be informal kinds of presentations. Again, just to give the users of the building a variety of ways to operate it in the future. This is that STEM room. STEM stands for Science and Technology, Engineering, and Math. It overlooks the Learning Commons on the first floor. This is at the second floor level. And in addition to looking into the Learning Commons, on the left, it actually looks out onto the low roof of the 1-story portion of the building that can be accessible, a little rooftop patio there. As well, which allows for a variety of activities as well. There may be science experiments that go on directly adjacent to this space. But again, it's a resource area for everyone in the school, and it's very centrally located. Here's those circulation areas in each classroom wing. It's not just a traditional elementary school corridors with lockers on both sides and classroom doors. Because it's a bit wider and it has that angle to it, you do have these alcoves of usable space, extended learning areas that, again, the teachers, as they sort of live with the building, will find more and more ways to utilize those spaces. But as designers, we always like to provide the occupants with a variety of spaces and not just typical classroom spaces. Here is a classroom, the kindergarten classroom here. You can see sort of the fun-shaped windows there that are unique to the first floor of the building for the younger students in there, but very flexible spaces We try to be very judicious with the amount of natural light, but every classroom space in the building does have access to natural light and views through windows. Here's the cafeteria space, which is, again, a flexible space. Some of those furniture that you might see there can be pushed aside. It can be used as an auditorium. That's why it's called the cafetorium. It does both. And on the left there, through those doors, that is the community entrance. And you can see how convenient it is both to the cafeteria straight ahead, and the gym is just to the right as you come in that vestibule. And likewise, the recess playground is right off that cafeteria. Here is the gym with that same vestibule there in the upper left corner there of the gymnasium. And again, even in that space, we care about getting natural light in. It's not a windowless box, but it is a community size. It's a full-size adult basketball court with cross courts, too, for younger children. With a few rows of bleachers, too. So it can support, a Saturday morning basketball league, or it could even support, say, the JV team from the high school coming down and playing here when the high school gym might be occupied. And then we have a video. We want to run that, Courtney? We've taken all these images now. This is a computer model. See those rooftop areas there at the first floor roof and the second floor roof, actually, from each level of the building. The distinct areas that are defined by those wings that are very conveniently located. And the extensive amount, we haven't shown all the possible photovoltaic solar panels on the roof, but all of those areas that aren't otherwise vegetated, green roofs or patios, could be solar panels as well on the roof. And then the same video can take us in the front door. The community access is on the left. This is the main door straight ahead here on the right. Immediately adjacent to the administration, this is the same kind of system being used at the Daw and Gibbons in their upgrades to get secure entrances. The Learning Commons immediately as you come in. Those students heading to the upper floors can go right up the stairs. Turning left and going down the hallway is where the cafeteria and the gymnasium are. Again, a full-size gym that could be used by adults as well as students, obviously. And there is a physical therapy room off of that gym. Here's the cafeteria with a stage at one end, obviously set up for lunch here in this furnishings. And by the way, the columns that you see here are natural wood. They're really structural. They hold up the building in this portion of the building. But we wanted to introduce some wood, not just steel frame and concrete, to bring the building, make it feel a little warmer throughout and to sort of reflect the fact that it is a school in the woods. It's environmentally sensitive choice of materials, too, by choosing wood. In that sense. Here's the STEM room on the upper floor. It overlooks the library. It has that outdoor patio as well. Here's a typical classroom neighborhood, as we call it, with those alcoves of space and access to classrooms. So here's an upper floor typical classroom as well. We still have time to choose the furniture, so the furnishings in these are still to be selected, but there's a lot of flexibility available there. And here's a nighttime view. This video, by the way, is available on the project website and accessible from the school department's website as well. That code there will get you there if you want to keep abreast of what's happening with the information and so forth. So I think that's it. And Tim can tell you a little more about the schedule.
Good evening, everybody. Kyle gets the good job, and I give you the price for it. So, hi. I'm Tim Bonfatti. I'm from Vertex Project Management. I'm joined by Chin Lin and Eric Rubin from Vertex. And we were the project managers on the high school, so I think a lot of what you're going to hear is basically the same process we used in the high school in terms of budgeting, in terms of how we work with the MSBA. So this is the project budget. As you can see, the cost, I think as many of you know, construction costs in the last 2 years in particular have gone up significantly, and basically on about 15% over those 2 years. So the costs are not inexpensive to build construction projects nowadays in Massachusetts. While it has slowed down, which is good news for us because we have another year of design, it's not going to go down. It's pretty much just leveled the escalation, which is good news from the point of being able to hold the budget, but it's embedded in as a pretty expensive cost. So the budget is $114 million, 114.4 million to be precise. As you can see, the construction cost at 91.8 is the majority of that cost, as it is on all projects. The other costs that are embedded in that 114 million are the designer and OPM fees and the cost for furnishing and fixturing and equipment, which are not inexpensive, and the contingency. So we carry a contingency for the project to make sure we're not going to come back to the town, and successfully we're able to do that with the high school. So those make up sort of the what we call the soft costs that build up that 91.8 into 114.4. When we arrive at the construction costs, we do that by each of us, both DRA and Vertex, hire an estimator to do a cost estimate, an independent cost estimate, and then we spend a few days, several days actually, getting together with the estimators. They talk to each other. We navigate through the differences between those estimates because they're using the same documents, and we arrive at a consensus of what the cost is, and that's what that 91.8 million construction cost reflects, is the consensus of the two estimators of the cost. And again, as I mentioned, this is the system we use at the high school, and it's been proven over the course of the last 20 plus years or so as a pretty effective way to predict the cost of a project. So when we look at it, the town share is the cost, and I'll talk more about the MSBA reimbursement, but the town share of this cost is $66.5 million. The MSBA and actually this fall increased significantly their reimbursement rate from over the baseline of what they would reimburse on. They increased that pretty significantly in the fall, so that this is obviously a much better deal for Stoughton now than it would have been if we were going in front of the MSBA, say, last year at this time. So effectively, the reimbursement is 42% of the costs. So that reimbursement is, I think, if you remember from the high school, that the MSBA receives its funding from the sales tax. So all the taxpayers of Stoughton are paying into the MSBA reimbursement pool, because if you buy anything and pay a sales tax. So it's a way for towns to get back some of the money that people have been putting into the sales tax and into the MSBA. And in this case, at 42% of the cost, that's a pretty significant reimbursement. So when we look at that, I mentioned the current town share of $66.5 million. When we look at the current, what the most recent data is available from the Department of Revenue statistics, and we assume the current borrowing rate that's happening now, the borrowing on this project won't occur for a year, but if we assume the rate stays pretty stable, as we believe it looks like it will, and the average valuation back at least with the data that we were using back from the Department of Revenue is $475,000. That brings us to an anticipated, when we do the calculations of that, the anticipated impact of the project on the average home is about $400 to $410 per household. And the reason why that's in particular is a range right now is that, as you note in the title there, we've submitted this numbers to the MSBA. We do go through a process of negotiating with them the final parameters of the deal, but we don't expect it to change significantly based on past experience. So that average tax impact comes out to about a 6% increase to the average homeowner's tax bill. And that's the project budget that we will be presenting at town meeting, and then the budget that will be acted on at the debt exclusion election, which I'll talk about in the next slide. So the timeline we've done multiple forums and multiple venues for discussing the project, but we are at getting to the point where now we're getting close to, we want to make sure we're very robust in our education of what the project means. The next step, we submitted the schematic design to the MSBA at the end of last week. The next step is the board meeting in April, which we have heard positive indications that we will be put forward on that board agenda, and the project will be passed at that point through the MSBA board. And then it's up to the town to decide whether it accepts the invitation from the MSBA that comes out of that board meeting. So the current plan is we have a warrant article in the town meeting in May, the annual town meeting, and then we'll be in front of the selectmen on the 19th, in a couple of weeks, to request that they put a debt exclusion question on the ballot for a special election in early June is our current request. We're looking at sometime in the first half of June before the schools are out and the summer begins. So that's the project timeline, and I'll turn it over to TJ for wrap up.
I get the introduction, wrap up. The introduction, not too fond of, but this part I always like. So some of this I'll say only for myself, but I think the building committee, and there's 14 members, all dedicated, hardworking people. We all, I think, disagree, but I want to qualify that because some of the things I'll say are pretty animated. From my perspective, and again, I think this is shared by the entire committee because this has been our aim, we can't be building a 550 student school to be used 180 days a year by only those students. It's got to mean more, and it's got to have more of a community impact. That was the approach for the high school. That's been the tenor of the discussions throughout this. And there are a number of different stakeholders that we consider throughout. We think about how teachers are going to interact daily throughout the project. Of course, school parents, of course, taxpayers, of course, business owners. And we look at the school, the whole school district and the town holistically and decide, and this is the goal of the feasibility study here, what's the best fit for this community? I hope that what you've seen over the last hour or so has met your expectations as much as mine when we began this process, because as I said at the beginning, I went in, you start kind of dry, is how do you get to the school when you don't have a picture of it? And DRA and Compass, we've worked with them before. They go out into this community, they appreciate where we are and the components of this community. You heard Carl say a number of different times that they were trying to design this school in the woods. Something I wasn't a South School student, I knew nothing about. That's what they achieved, natural products. Compass, Vertex now, they worked on the high school. They understand the schools, the district and the town's financial needs, the way the government works, who to talk with. So, you heard Tim do the unfortunate task of running through the numbers. We've done that before. They have done that before. They understand what this community can absorb and what it's going to take to convince people. So, with all these people in mind, Tim does a great job of explaining something that's very difficult. There is a cost to it. There's got to be a benefit on the back end. This town over the last, I want to say about 5 years, but it probably goes back 10 from when I was on the board. We started discussing things like sewer down Park Street, which the town has invested in. There is a study that's ongoing with the Metropolitan Area Planning Council to look at the rezoning to get some economic benefit out of this area of Stoughton. There's been a lot of thought and interest in this area as an area of growth for the community. And if you live in this area of town, you're one of several thousand households, maybe 3,000 or 4,000 households. If I eyeball it correctly, there's really all of our recreational facilities and community facilities outside of maybe, if you want to consider the Cedar Hill Golf Course, everything is focused on the other end of town. This is an investment into this area of growth for the town that I think the committee has done a really solid job of focusing on. In addition, I think you heard Dr. Baeta speak in the beginning about how there was an eye towards future town needs and future town goals. We had that in mind at the beginning, and that continues. It's, of course, as I said, going to be a cost, but the approach of this committee has been to take all of these interests in mind and consider these along the way, same as we did on the high school. And it's kind of, maybe just a quirk of every 4 years we have a presidential election, and it seems that, we were on the same time track as the high school project in a presidential year. So we're doing the same thing, discussing the same sorts of interests that we were back then. But in the end, we will come before the town meeting sometime in May. We'll be asking the select board, to set an election date in June, and we'll strike that. We'll present the project to the town meeting and to the voters, and hope that you could see what we've seen. And, there's been a lot of thought in this project. All I can say is that the people involved, if you like the high school project, were the same people that did it and took the same approach. That project, for efficiency purposes, just as an example, we shot for LEED Silver in terms of energy efficiency and sustainability. We achieved LEED Gold. We set a budget amount. We came in the end, $5 million approximately, give or take, under budget. We would have been much more, but we had some hazardous waste and other things that nobody ever foresaw that still $5± million under budget. I think you'll like this project when you see it. I hope you like this project when we present it to you again and again and again between now and May. And I know you'll love this project when it's built, because the more I see about it, the more I like it. So we do have some questions, I think, that have been submitted online that Jeff Pickett can moderate. We also have on our website, you can see there's that little scanning. I forget what those little scanning things are, QR code. You can scan that will bring you to the website. You can submit questions online, email questions, they get answered. Anybody who's gone online on social media or otherwise who has asked a question, I guarantee you've gotten an answer, and you've gotten it quickly too, probably in more words than you ever expected. But we're trying to be transparent, open, give you all the information you need to make an evaluation that it took us a year to reach, which is this is the best fit for Stoughton. So Jeff, if we have anybody in the room who wants to ask a question, we can start here, but if not, we can move online.
We have a couple of questions from online.
Jeff can mediate, and if they can just give us a second to swap out people to answer.
Sure. The first question is asking about how many parking spaces there will be.
You're testing my memory here. I'm sorry I didn't have that number off the top of my head, but I'll see if maybe we might have some help with our folks online. Or maybe when we were talking with the principals about how many spaces were needed, we were able to accommodate. We're trying to balance the amount of pavement on the site with, obviously, the needs for the functional needs.
Courtney Road 143.
That sounds like a familiar number. I think, yeah, we started around 150 or so. Significantly more than the current South School, but the building obviously is larger than the current South School too.
The next question is, if approved, what is the target date of completion for the project?
The start of school year in August of '27.
And those are the two questions we have right now. More than welcome to keep submitting questions.
Hi. Oh, so we're not going to hear it? Okay. Hi, my name is Lori Jakes. I am a parent whose children do go to South School. So I'm here to tell you that South School needs to be updated, certainly. But my question is, if this is not approved, what happens then? I assume, again, I go to the South School regularly. The building it needs to be updated. So if this does not get approved by the town, what happens next?
Thank you for coming out, Ms. Jakes. So this is it's a great question. Number one, the district is still redistricting regardless of the issue of a new school. Very important for everybody to know that and what that means, because there's an impact literally throughout the entire community. The second is our current facilities master plan from 2023 and going back to pricing that's already outdated is well over $40 to $50 million worth of work that needs to take place. Everything that you can think of, from the roofs to the windows to heating systems. I'm not a specialist in any of that, but as you read that laundry list, we currently have a facility subcommittee that's also looking at what to do with the South and other schools and so on and so forth. And the number one thing that we just got from our colleagues at DRA is literally a laundry list of all of the needs, because that was part of the research, right, to figure out where we were going. We needed to, through the MSBA protocol, really look at, is this a renovation addition? Is it just a renovation? Is it a new school? And of course, in this case, Stoughton also took it to another level, rightfully so, which was to take a look at long-term and say it's time to consider consolidation, because we can't go out for an elementary school every other year, right? We got to remember, if you look at the years on the chart of the last time some of these schools were worked on. I was a member of the Stoughton School Committee when we actually did an addition to O'Donnell Middle School. That's the last major, if you really think about it. We've had roofs and we've had boilers and so on, but that's the last time. And I was on the committee from 1998 to 2004, which is pushing 20 years plus. So regardless of how the vote goes and people decide how they can't afford it, want it, don't want it, the district will have to redistrict anyways, and we will have to come back without any support from the SBA to the taxpayers to do capital improvements to the buildings.
Can I just ask a follow-up? So just to confirm, so we're all on the same page, our taxes would still go up, most likely?
Yeah, most likely anything that has to do with millions of dollars, to a certain extent you can borrow, and an example would have been our current fire department. We had that balance between ability to afford borrowing, but then still having to go for a certain amount out to the taxpayer. So in this particular case, the debt exclusion allows for you to just be paying whatever that amount is going to be to you as a family on that actual building, like we're doing with other facilities within the community.
Just to clarify, I think that number of capital repairs is somewhere in the vicinity of $27 to $30 million. But without knowing when it's going to take place, as was explained, there's escalation to keep in mind. So that's kind of the best guess right now. And that does not improve the educational environment. It doesn't change classrooms. It only fixes what's broken or brings things up to standards.
Just that I was scolded for not using the mic. That was also just for one school, one elementary school's worth of students. The Wilkins wouldn't be involved. So that $27 million addresses nothing for the other students, K through 5 student population. So you saw a slide very early on. I think it was Dr. Baeda's slide, and it was showing the age of the schools. The Gibbon School was our newest school, and that was built in 1971. That was the first school that we had done since the high school. I think the high school opened up a lot of opportunity for the town. It allowed us to look at something like this. It allowed us to look, I think, at a new fire station, hopefully a new public safety building. This school is not just isolated to one school. There's more to it. Doing this school certainly will address two schools' student populations worth of issues, but it's much more than that. Now we can look at improving our schools because we started doing that for the first time in 50 years. So to answer your question, this town hadn't addressed any, Joe calls it an addition to the South School. It wasn't. It was about half a dozen boxes that were parked on one side of the school and then closed in. Temporary classrooms that were closed in and eventually made permanent. We didn't have any addition to the O'Donnell Middle School. We had a temporary fix that became a permanent fix. Is that what we want to do with this project? And I know I'm preaching to the choir, but I think in this case, we've been proactive at bringing something together, not for just one school. Because we haven't done anything in 50 years, we have to address schools in leaps and bounds. If we do one school every 10 years, which is the pace that we're on right now, I think that's as manageable as we can get, both financially for the town and also for the student population. Sorry, I had to jump up.
I promise you the last one. I'm going to go after TJ every time. I think it's really important when we look at service delivery and education, what this does for us. I've kept saying the word redistricting regardless. We are at the seams with our classrooms because our buildings are built prior to IDEA, which is the concept of special education. Think about that. Early 1970s when IDEA came into place. All we've been doing is taking regular-sized classrooms and consolidating them in some way, shape, or form to make sure that we have our students stay in Stoughton, not only live in Stoughton, but be educated in Stoughton, play in Stoughton, go to church, synagogue, whatever, in Stoughton. This building would be our first building that actually allows that concept to take place and allows for us to shift other schools to be able to provide more of those spaces in general. So it's a long-term plan that starts with one school, but the idea is that our growing population of our two huge growing populations, our special ed population is at over 750 students, and our EL population is about to hit 700. So and it's a 200% increase in that EL population since January of 22. Those are staggering numbers for community, and that doesn't play into a lot of the politics of shelters and migrants and all that. We're talking literally the numbers that are moving into the community.
Don't go too far. We have a question about what will the Wilkins School be used for once the new elementary school is opened?
All right, so great question. So we put together a subcommittee to really take a look at how we want to use the South, the Wilkins, and the Jones. That subcommittee will be making recommendations to the full school committee for consideration. That is a while away, right? We first got to know, is the South going to be closed or not? Because that begins the process of building a new school. Then from there, you have what are the options for the South School. It is not being torn down as part of this project, because it's not built on the same site. That's an MSBA protocol. We have the Jones School that's got some hurt going on, and it also happens to house the central office. And we have the Wilkins, which has some really solid bones. We've spent millions of dollars on windows and roofs. We do need to take a look down the road at probably maybe an accelerated repair for boilers and heating. Just today it was 106 degrees in one of the rooms. So we need to do that, and that's what this subcommittee is going to look at, is what are the options that are available to the school committee, but it really does rely on what is the vote, and then the extra work will take place in conjunction at the same time.
So that concludes our program. Again, please go online. Please check out our website. Ask questions. We'll go out into the community. If you don't see us, please invite us. We'll talk. We want to sell this project to you, or at least explain it to you and try to convince you that what we did was both correct and appropriate for the town. But welcome any questions offline. For tonight, that concludes the presentation. Thank you all for watching online. Thank you for those of you who are here in the room. And thank you to Jeff for moderating. Oh, and for SMAC for broadcasting, and Luke for taking over. Thank you all.